Thursday, June 15th, 2023, committee of the whole meeting. Let's call the meeting to order, and Village Manager Crowley, if you could do the roll call, please.
Trustee Hallwax.
Here.
Trustee Listener. Trustee Mealopoulos.
Here.
Trustee Underdunk. Here. Trustee Rubin. Here. Trustee Scott.
Here.
And I'm here.
And you are here, President.
We are not live streaming this meeting tonight, but we're video recording, and we'll make the recording available on the Village YouTube channel. The first item is public comment. This portion of the meeting allows for those in attendance to address the board regarding non-agenda items. I'll ask the public comments that relate to agenda items be provided when we get to that item on the agenda. All comments are limited to 3 minutes, and we'll notify the speaker when their time is up. Are there any non-agenda comments? I don't see any. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the golf clubhouse project design and management services. And I'll ask the assistant to the village manager, John Pate, public works director, Dave Mao, and the golf club manager, Stella Nanos, to present.
Thank you, President Rowan. Tonight, this evening, hopefully you've had a chance to review the memo that is in the packet, but we'll review parts of that tonight as well. We want to walk through the history of kind of how we got here and the next steps that need to be done to continue to move the project forward. Ultimately, we're seeking the board's feedback, and if you have any concerns or questions that need answers before the July meeting, which is when we plan to bring contracts back for design and management services for the project. So again, now that the referendum is passed, how we're looking forward to next steps. We know that we ultimately need services rendered for design and for management. The design services would be an architect, although there's been a project plan in place for this building, a program kind of scheduled out. We need much more work on that side of things for the design services in terms of schematic, design development, everything all the way through construction on the architectural side. And then management, something in the form of construction management services. We'll get into the options a little bit later, but we know that the village doesn't have somebody in-house that has this area of expertise or the needed skill set or the time to dedicate to managing this project, something of this scale. So with that, I'd like to invite Golf Club Manager Stella Nanos to walk through the history and kind of talk about how we got here today.
Thank you, John. So reviewing the process that took place in 2013, it was a very long process that started out with a request for qualifications. There was direct mail pieces to people that we knew were in the business, and we also put out a public announcement on it. We did have 13 firms that responded to it, which was quite large. And a subcommittee of the Clubhouse Task Force was put together at that time to oversee this process. And out of the 13, 7 firms were chosen to go through the interview process. So all the 7 firms were interviewed. These were public meetings. Everyone was vetted. Their references were all checked. At the end of that interview process, the 7 firms were presented to the full Clubhouse Task Force, and they were ranked based on their qualifications, evaluations, discussions, presentations, et cetera. So we ranked them, but we only presented the top 4. And then in 2016, when we started the process again, we went to our list. The number 1 ranked firm at that time had gone out of business. So per the Professional Service Act, we went to the 2nd ranked firm, which is FGM Nicholas Design Group. And since that time, we have worked with this group to help us with quite a bit of the necessary elements to help us move the project along. A lot of the design elements were already decided by the Clubhouse Task Force, and FGM helped us put them into design renderings. We had our conceptual renderings that were made, site plans were made, floor plans were made, space requirements. They gave us square footage based on the recommendations of the Clubhouse Task Force. Those were all the elements that we needed in order to come up with budget estimates. So we did use FGM quite a bit already. We didn't spend more than $10,000 with them. They were never engaged in a contract. These were just offshoots for the particular needs that we needed at that time. But now we're ready, obviously, to move into the phase of engaging someone. And FGM is the group that we believe is still the number one. They are focused on municipalities. They have a long laundry list of clubhouses that they have done since our initial interview that also ranked them as number two. And the next step in this process will be to create an ad hoc, we're calling it a design review committee. And that is going to consist of maybe 7 to 9 residents and members of the village board as well, to review the floor plans, the design, and preliminary designs of the building, and help with the architectural style. All of these meetings will be public meetings, and we want the village residents' input on these meetings. And this ad hoc committee will help us bring the public input into the discussion and help with recommendations, which will ultimately be brought to the village board, because the village board is going to serve as the ultimate decision makers. At the conclusion of schematic design, architects will move into design development, and then site plans, floor plans, elevations will be finalized. And then, although most of the decisions will have been made already by this ad hoc committee, it will be called back together for a little bit of involvement at that point. And then it will develop into the construction documents to be finalized and bidding. So we continue our discussions with FGM. We feel like they are a good partner for this project. As I said, they've already worked with us on it, and they have an extensive resume of actually doing clubhouses themselves, not just municipal buildings, which brings a certain expertise that you can't find from any architectural service company. And also based on the previous RFQ and RFP, which was extensive. It was about a 10-month process. We're very confident in FGM and moving forward with them. And John's going to review now the different construction delivery models.
Thanks, Phil. And if I could just mention too, the rest of that process is everything from deciding, an architectural style to follow all the way down to the very last finishes through the construction. So the architect will be involved the whole way. The construction management side of it, we think should as well. Staff's recommending that the construction manager be engaged now to be part of that process the whole way, help ensure that we're designing something that's realistic by providing cost estimates along the way. So this group and the village board doesn't begin to explore options that aren't within the budget or aren't going to be, able to be part of the project. As we kind of detailed in your packet, partnering with that firm is going to make sure that the project stays on time and on budget. And there's a couple of options of ways to do that. The two that we're exploring here are design build and construction manager at risk, or construction management. Sometimes you just see it simply referred to as CM. Both of those processes would provide services for cost estimates throughout the project, managing subcontractors, the true general contracting portion of it, schedule management, and all of those pieces would be included either way. The main difference between the two is who engages the architect. Under design build, whoever was the construction manager would retain the architect under their contract. The village would have a contract with the construction manager. The construction manager has a contract with the architect. Under construction manager at risk, or CM, the village would retain both the architect and the construction manager. Slight difference, but that was the key one, whether the village has 2 points of contact or one. Since we wrote this memo, actually, staff's learned a little bit more about a bill that's on the governor's desk regarding design build that we believe, if signed, would elongate the selection process for a firm for design build services. That's just one thing that we're keeping in mind. We're going to continue to explore that as we do some more research before the July meeting. But that could be one factor that we take into consideration when deciding between design build or construction management. Essentially, it affects the selection process, and the state would then have laws that would impact a non-local government, non-home rule local government like ourselves, and how we select that firm going out for an RFP, a process that they've outlined in that bill. that would add time to the project, that would, delay getting this started. And so that might be one key factor we take into consideration when deciding between those two options.
Can you say that again? Which of the two options is going to be affected by the legislation?
Design build, which would be where we contract with the construction manager, they
They have
contract
it.
with the architect. Which again, the processes are very similar. That's the key difference. And that might be a part of our decision point is forfeiting some more time to go through those hoops, if you will. Please.
So in the non-governmental world, one option is always go hire a general contractor.
Yeah. Design, bid, build. Yeah.
And sometimes you hire you hire your architect separate, just so you have two different people to go look to and make sure that they're looking over each other's shoulders. My question is that what we're calling a construction manager effectively our general contractor?
Yes, they would serve in that capacity.
So they would engage the subs themselves, they'd give us a contract.
Guaranteed maximum price.
Yeah, they're assuming that risk. They have all those relationships, and that's part of why we believe that that'll lead to a better outcome of staying on.
Thank you, I just wanted to put it in the context.
They would go out and show us all the bids that they receive, and they would make a recommendation, but ultimately it's our choice.
They competitively bid each of the trades with their pool of contractors, any that we would propose be included. So it meets the state's competitive bid requirements for each of the trades. They're managing each of those. But to Stella's point, and we'll talk about it in a minute, the village would have approval process, whatever the team is, to review and approve each of those trade contracts as they're presented.
Okay, so the max price contract will essentially be built based on the bids that come in.
That's the at-risk component of construction manager at risk.
And obviously, there could be a situation where they get to a point where they have to do some value engineering in consultation with us to make that happen. Certainly a possibility, but hopefully with them being involved up front in the process, that's avoided. To your point, obviously what you called in the private sector is common in the public sector too. The difference in this process of involving them early is to bring them the whole set of ways so that as we're doing these things, as these meetings are taking place, as decisions on the design are taking place, they're doing the cost estimation, and we're kind of making sure that we do this as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Yeah.
And the construction manager would also attend all of the ad hoc design committee meetings. So that's a big component of, and it was explained to me as, you have a group of people and they may have champagne desires, but you have a beer budget, that they would say, that's lovely and it's wonderful that you want a chandelier that's going to drop from the ceiling. However, it's not within your budget, you can't do it. And they would manage that on our behalf and give the realistic view of what our budget, what we have, what our constraints are, and what are the important things to make sure that we include in the building without getting into, additional expenses that may not be as functional or give us as much return on our investment. So they also take into consideration, if you can have an extra 30 seats versus marble in the bathroom, you should be going this way, and they would help explain it to our design committee.
Bringing that price element that the architect would.
Well, I was gonna, on the topic of budgets and costs, do we know if there's a financial difference between the design build versus the CMAC risk overhead?
There is. It's slight, but there is. The design build would be more expensive. Part of that cost obviously would be the entire architect's fees that would essentially get passed through that cost, right? Whether we engage them separately or either way. And then in addition to that, their percentage keep in their proposals is about 0.25%. It's slight, 0.25% more expensive in the design build process. And then their flat fee, I think it was something around $20,000 difference between the two. So all to say the design build would be more expensive, but it's slight.
More expensive, potentially take longer.
Yeah, because of the legislative changes.
Aside from the state's bill, the services you'd be buying separately is the fact that you don't have to manage the architect, you're paying them to manage the architect for you.
On the other hand, if you have the architect working directly for you, as opposed to being beholden to your construction manager. Doesn't that give you another sort of honest voice in the room?
100%. Yeah. I think those are the pros and cons of each, you know, and it kind of, you know, becomes the burden on the village to make sure we're doing a good job communicating with all the parties involved to make sure that.
Won't we be able to build into this that the architect has to be able to talk to us and we have to be able to talk to him? I mean, and we'll have to get whoever the contractor is that we sign up to say that's okay.
And we're going to get to it in a second, but the construction management firm that we worked with a little bit on this project and FGM are two very good partners. You know, I want to underscore that they've done lots of work together. They're both, you know, highly qualified and well respected. And
Now, there may be other folks that want to be construction management.
Of course. So if I could just
One question.
no, please.
Which one would be more efficient?
I'm sorry.
In today's legislation, which of the two would be quicker?
I don't know that there's
Because there's kind of
that much of a difference, given how it would work. I think part of what time is to some degree of the essence in terms of getting the process underway. And I think that's a consideration that we're going to do some more work to finalize and solidify before we bring something back to you guys next month. But I think at present, it's probably negligible.
Yeah. I just want to talk a little bit about. Oh, I'm sorry, please sit.
Has FGM done any work in the area? That we go see some of the results of their work?
Absolutely. And in fact,
We have a long list that we could share.
Okay.
in the memo, I didn't include the list of clubhouses they've done in the area because it was so long. I mean, they've done a ton of.
Okay.
It's an architectural firm that has a laundry list of municipal work. They also have an entire division dedicated to golf clubhouses, both private and public.
Just
Yeah.
a couple examples. The other thing, there's a lot of talk about the LEED conformance, the leadership in energy and environmental design. And so we have to make sure that whatever architecture firm comes in has that appropriate certification.
FGM has a section of their company that directly works with certifications, and I think they have like 5 gold certifications that they've done recently.
Okay.
So they're very qualified.
Okay, that's great. That does add to the cost.
It does add to the cost.
Yeah,
and
somewhere
that's-
between maybe 2 and 3%.
One of the things that we're working through is understanding with Cook County, some of the requirements that the county will have for the building. At this moment in time, it isn't LEED certification, it's LEED standard. So it's working and designing the building to LEED certification standards, but not necessarily
Without going through the
requiring.
certification process.
Correct, yeah.
And
So there's
saving the
a,
money.
there is a significant cost savings to that. The process is quite, as you likely know, is quite lengthy and quite expensive. So if we could avoid that and still reap the benefit because the building is designed to those levels, that would be the ideal.
The county doesn't have to approve the building.
It has to go through the county's permitting process as per the land use agreement, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But we've already initiated those conversations with them, and what they've communicated to us is that their requirements at this point do not require certification.
Yeah, I was just thinking on the whole building as a whole, whether it will be subject to our building code or the county's.
It would likely be subject to the county's code, but we would build it to both if there's a difference. We're about the same at this point, yeah.
It's on county land. So,
Darling.
well, I got that, I got that, but that's
think-
always true.
Yeah, your point, trustee Underdunk, is not lost on us. I think particularly as you find conflicts between the two, we're gonna build to the higher standard.
Okay.
Turning back to WB Olson, if we could talk about them a little bit. WB Olson is a full services construction management firm. They're highly experienced in both municipal and golf clubhouse work. They've been involved in this project because they're a long-term partner of the village. As these things progressed through and the village needed cost estimates on some of the initial work that FGM was designing, as Stella mentioned earlier. The village utilized them to just help provide some of those cost estimates, help to start develop a budget. Because of that, the village has continued to engage with them just in terms of conversations on this project. And we do think that they'd be a suitable partner for it. Locally, their work includes Skokie Country Club, Conway Farms, Shore Acres, Westmoreland. They've done a lot of work in this area. They've done a lot of work throughout the state and obviously in golf clubhouses too. Additionally, just as a note, they're currently serving as the construction manager on the on the Watts Center renovation that the Park District's undertaking. The same sort of process that we would do for this on a local scale there. So with that, I'd ask for Works Director Dave Mao to just walk through a couple different projects historically from the village's perspective that we've used construction management firms on.
Very good. Back in 1996, we were at a similar crossroads. The voters of the community had just approved the issuance of $2.6 million in bonds for the Public Works Garage rehabilitation. And that included work across the street at 320 Hazel, as well as the development of the water tower site. The structures that are at the water tower site today were part of that improvement. And given the high profile nature of the project and really what up till then had been a very inconsistent experience that staff had with traditional design, bid, build work here in the Village Hall, we were at a similar crossroads as tonight. We began looking at alternate service delivery methods and ended up recommending a design build process to the village board. And I would echo, John said it well, that the difference between the design build and construction management is more of a nuance. And in particular, when you've got an architect and a contractor that have a history working together. So we went through back in 97, a similar qualification-based selection process where we interviewed, we had 25 RFQs submitted and went and narrowed that down. We interviewed 6 teams, project teams. We had similarly had created a project review committee that included one sitting village trustee at the time, along with staff. And ultimately, that process selected and recommended a design build team headed by W.B. Olson. And so then that began our relationship with Olson. As John noted, they're long established. They were founded in 1970. They're a Northbrook-based contractor, well respected, and a medium-sized construction firm with an excellent reputation. So in spring of 97, the village board approved a contract and design work was underway. W.B. Olson and the non-conventional design build process produced an excellent partnership between the village and village staff and Olson and their architect at the time that worked within the available project budget, much smaller scale, much like many of the same decisions that this group will have to sort out. And then looking back over my notes, I think the outcome of that was we were able to maximize the baseline scope of the improvements we needed for the garage rehabilitation and still be able to consider bid alternates. To John's point, when you set a guaranteed max, which is the construction manager's ultimate responsibility, then you work hard and avail yourself to any and all means, including value engineering and seeking out different alternates. The chandelier versus the poised light is a good example. And we went through all those same trade-offs with the garage project. And I can tell you today that the department's experience with W.B. Olson was very positive. We found them to be extremely professional, hands-on from start to finish. Stella noted that we had, in key principles, Dave Olson himself was involved in every weekly construction progress meeting, along with all the decisions relative to bidding out the trade work. It was a new animal to many of us on staff, but I came away from that a big proponent of that process and for the right project. In bricks and mortar infrastructure work that we do on the outside, streets and sewers and the like, water main work, the pool of contractors is more predictable, particularly regionally. On the building side, from my experience, not so much. When you follow a traditional design bid build, you're obligated to award to the lowest responsible bidder. We had that experience here at the Village Hall, and it was not good. So that left a permanent mark in my memory that there are alternatives, and when there's alternatives that are a right fit for a project, I'm a strong proponent of that. So in conclusion, I mean, I would strongly endorse the consideration of WB Olson for this project based on our past experience and interactions we've had with them since. We've used them for some one-offs, help us evaluate feasibility study on the potential relocation of the Public Works Garage, as an example. Came in and worked with us and put in far more time than their proposal ever. There's a similar, as Stella noted, with the work they did to assist the golf club even to get to this point, because they see the big picture, and they are deeply involved in this area of their business has become probably right near the top of the work they do, the golf course and golf clubhouse facilities. So I'm a strong proponent of, based on past experience with WB Olson.
So with that, I think this is just a good point in the meeting to take a second to determine what other questions and things are answered. Obviously, we're looking for feedback on this parts of the process, but at the same time, if there's questions that you have that we might be able to answer tonight, or if there's questions that you have that we need to get answers to before the July meeting, we're happy to kind of have that point in the discussion now.
So let me just say, so I wasn't around doing this stuff in 2013. None of us were, except for some staff. I was not around doing this stuff in 2015 and 16. And as a result of that, I expressed some interest. We're talking about spending $15 million to find out, with respect to the architects, whether they were. So humoring me, a group of us met with them, and they did I'll say it's their dog and pony show, though by they're qualified. And the architects are totally qualified. I mean, they're just qualified. And one of the things they showed was, okay, we have gotten approval from our residents to do a project that's going to have certain things. And we've sort of identified those, and there's a limit, so we can move them around, but we have to have those things, and we can't change them because it would cost way more or be different. But on top of that skeleton, they can move it around to be more efficient, to make sure it works, and also to look however we want it to look like. And part of their dog and pony show is to show that, okay, you want prairie style, you want French, they just have, and they can do all of that. And I was very impressed. So this is something I was worried about, because we have $50 million, none of us want to blow it. But I am totally persuaded that we can work with them and get it right. So, yeah, so was a decision made, in 2013, 2015. I don't think we need to remake that decision with respect to the architect. I've not done any of that kind of review with the contractor, and I don't know whether there are other people around that would make a pitch. But, certainly with respect to the architects, the decision sort of was already made, and it's fine. And I'm comfortable with it.
I would say President Rowan's point, for anyone who's a golfer, when you look on the list and you see Arrowhead and Cantini, you're basically saying, those are like two of the best design things I've ever seen. The only question then becomes, how do we know that we're paying them the right rate, right? We're not going to have multiple things. That'd be the only thing to address for the people to do.
Yeah, I think that's something we can certainly provide more insights on next month. And Trustee Hallwax, you and I talked a little bit about that when we connected on this subject. the one unique component to architectural services fees is that generally they fall within the same set percentage, kind of on an industry-wide basis. But we need to gather some of that information still and kind of challenge that information as we are working through it over the next several weeks. And we intend to do that.
Let me ask a question about, so WB Olson has been around. The village has good experience with them. There are, other park districts use them. Skokie Country Club is using them on sort of a similar project. So we're not going to be crazy if we went with them. Is anybody else putting their hand up saying, I could do this too? I want to do this too. Are we hearing, if we looked?
We're not hearing, I think what we've heard is interest in the project, but not necessarily specific to construction management. I think, that's certainly a question that is worth asking and contemplating. I will say, one point we want to be mindful of is how long the process will be extended if we march down a path. What are the relationships that perhaps the architectural services firm and the design or the construction management team have? That is an important component of it too. And we can look at that a bit more as we work through these next few weeks. I think the hard part is, and I think some of it is timing, certainly. We want to make sure that we get started with the architectural schematic design process because it's going to take some time. We want to engage the community in that process. We want there to be a thoughtful, engaging timeline that is reasonable and realistic. And we also would like to, if humanly possible, break ground by, the end of next summer, early part of next fall. So we're looking, that's a relatively short window of about 15 months. And when you have that kind of a short window, every week is important. And so given the kind of the status of where the clubhouse is today and some of the struggles that we have in terms of keeping that building functional, there may be a cost to waiting and going through a process that may land us in the same place. And so I think that's something we can do some more research on and bring back to you with our recommendations next month. But I think that's not an insignificant component of this. If we were to delay the project by 6 to 8 more months, there could be a not insignificant investment that we'd need to make in the existing building to keep it functional. Particularly, I'm thinking in the kitchen area and the bathroom facilities, which are both a struggle to keep operational today. Well, and that's
just to mention a few.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, every day I walk in there, I say it's one less day that I have to worry about this building. Couldn't be spoken more truthfully that we do have an issue. WB Olson, I feel if we went through a process, would be our top choice. Not that I've worked with other design firms, but I have worked with them on this project. I mean, they were also involved in the beginning that we talked with them with the Clubhouse Task Force at that time, and they were offering their services. And the fact that they have a relationship with FGM, I think is a big bonus that if we looked at many other firms, we would say that would put them to the top of the list because Dan Nicholas, who is a partner in FGM, has directly worked with Dave Olson, who's Dave Olson, WB Olson. So they have a relationship and they bring projects in at budget and they've had this experience under their belt. So it would project them to the top of the list in my mind as it is. And cost estimates, I think that whatever they give us, we've seen what they're giving with the park district, that we would know, and also dealing with people that Dave Mao can direct us, is this a fair price? And it does seem, as much as we don't like to hear it, there is an industry standard. You know, you always want to try to get the best price and try to negotiate, and I'm sure I could get a better deal from this guy. But are you really getting a better deal, or are you gonna regret, you know, saving $10,000? Their experience speaks for itself, and especially their experience in golf business, I think. I mean, I'm very confident in WB Olson and the partnership that they have with FGM.
I think the one point to underscore in Stella's comments, we are in the process of gathering contracts from other municipalities and park districts that have done similar type projects recently. And working to understand the structure of those contracts. And thankfully, Elrod Friedman represents a number of those communities as well and has a lot of experience in building out those contracts and reviewing them. So we are in the data gathering phase right now of pulling all of that together, and that's all going to be part of what we provide to you guys next month in terms of our recommendations on it.
Maybe one quick one. We talked about schedule and, you know, each day is critical. Have both firms been approached and advised of our schedule? Like, do they have manpower to be able to meet our deadlines? Only ask because I know in architectural and engineering fields, there's a lot of turnover and it's very busy. Are they not that busy to be able to?
They're both aware of our schedule,
And they are.
and they have the manpower available. That's a question they had too. If we engage you, are you gonna tell us, is it gonna be 6 months before you could start? And because we've been on the radar with them, working with them, they knew, you know, they came to a board meeting pre-referendum, both FGM and WB Olson were at that meeting when it was determined that it would go to referendum. So they are in tune with it for a very long time.
Question?
Yeah.
The new legislation that's on the governor's desk, would that also probably extend things? I mean, we are in kind of a time.
If we were to go down the path of a design build contract, it would, yeah, it would. And that's it's brand new information. We literally just got that yesterday. So we're trying to understand what it would mean, how it would work with us. But one of Stu's colleagues at Elrod Friedman, Brooke Lenneman, is working with us on that. She advised us of that information yesterday. So again, it's on his desk. He hasn't signed it yet. It's among a number of pieces of legislation that are awaiting signature, so it could happen at any moment. But we anticipate that it will.
And it would become effective immediately or?
Yes, that's what I don't know. Yeah, I assume relatively immediately or July 1st, the turn of the state's fiscal year.
But much in the same way that we're talking about elongating the process and timeline by going through an RFP process that's select a firm, a construction management firm, it would have a lot of the same requirements. It would just heavily structure our ability to make changes to that selection process. So, you know.
I brought it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's along of the same vein. Also potentially could be moved if we decide to go the other route, the construction manager at risk route of the management services piece.
Anybody else have anything they want? I mean, we got some stuff to think about, but anything else? Let's go to the next agenda item then, which is discussion of the electric vehicle readiness program, and class our management analyst Jeff Maudsley to present.
Yeah, thank you, President Rowan. I'm very excited to discuss and present this innovative and cutting edge program that will hopefully prepare us for the coming wave of electric vehicles and hopefully qualify us for some additional grant funding in the future as it relates to EVs. Before I get into the program, I want to take a step back and look at electric vehicles as a whole. Greenhouse gas is obviously a major driver of climate change. And so a chief emitter of greenhouse gases are transportation, cars, planes, trains, that sort of thing. Electric vehicles are a way to, actually is a way to cut greenhouse gas emissions and reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Currently, EVs in Illinois are somewhat of a boutique or a niche purchase. As you can see, there are currently 55,000 EVs in service in Illinois. We have 7 million registered passenger vehicles, but many projections say that that is going to ramp up in the coming years. By 2030, they're projecting that up to 50% of new car purchases will be EVs. Driving some of that increase in EVs is some legislation, both on the state and federal level, that has been passed in the past couple of years. The Illinois piece of that legislation is the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act of 2021. It sets the goal of having 1 million EVs in service by 2030. So a dramatic increase in the next 7 years of the number of EVs in service in Illinois. It also provides rebates for EV purchases. Earlier this year, they announced the rebate program, and residents take advantage of, and a rebate for EV chargers. So when you put an EV charger in your home, you get a rebate for that as well. There are two pieces of federal legislation to drive the increase in EVs. One is the bipartisan infrastructure law of 2022. That provided $5 billion in charging infrastructure to make sure that EVs on the road have a place to charge when they're going, especially on longer trips. And then the Federal Inflation Reduction Act 2022 also provided some additional tax credits for EV purchasing. As local governments, we're responsible for implementing all the laws inside of our jurisdiction. EVs represent a pretty significant change, and many municipalities have laws that inadvertently provide obstacles and barriers to encouraging and using EVs in their communities. And so to help with that, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus last year developed the EV Readiness Program. The EV Readiness Program is to help municipalities evaluate some of their laws, some of their practices, and make sure that they're eliminating barriers for EV purchasing and using in their communities. Last year, they put out a call to Illinois municipalities and asked for volunteers to help test out the EV Readiness Program as part of a pilot. Glencoe decided that we would like to take advantage of this, and we were selected to be part of the first cohort of 15 communities to participate in the EV Readiness Program. So we're part of the testing phase before they roll this out statewide. There will be another second cohort that's going to start later this year of another set of 15 or so communities. And we started this process in December. The cohort has been meeting regularly to discuss different aspects of EVs and the readiness program, and to help us prepare for getting all the documentation together we need to demonstrate that we're doing things to get ready for EVs, and that we are either don't have barriers or that we're preparing to eliminate the barriers to EV ownership. As part of the program, there are 3 different levels of certification that we can achieve. At the base level is the bronze level. And in your packet, I included the list of all the different credited activities that can be done as part of the program. Some of them are required for bronze, and then we have to do, they call it here extra points, but that's not really a good way of thinking of it. It's more of like elective points, where we have to do a pool of them that reach a certain level. And then if we want to go even farther, we can attempt the silver level of certification, which would require us to do all the bronze level things, plus there's some additional things and the requisite elective points. And then if the highest level of recognition would be the gold level, which would be both the bronze and silver and the required gold actions and the extra points. So as far as that goes, I'd like some input, like some input on some key decision points. First of all, the level of designation that we want to go for. Bronze, I think, is very doable. It's a matter of us documenting some current practices and doing some enhanced information for our residents. The silver will take a little bit more work. It will require a little bit more information sharing with our residents. We're going to have to work with our fleets to make sure our own EV fleet, we have plans for an EV fleet. They've started doing some of this work, but we have to do some work to formalize that. And we'd also have to look at doing some future planning for EVs. The gold level I don't think is very realistic for us. It involves trying to find some incentives for people to purchase EVs and install chargers in their home. We have to create systems for data gathering so that we can provide metrics for EV use in the community. The second thing I'd like input on is that EV readiness program suggests some code amendments that we could make to ensure like some of these barriers I talked about earlier will be eliminated or reduced. Our code, fortunately, tends to be very broad and very inclusive in terms of what we allow people to do. So a lot of the suggestions that they're saying, consider changing your code to accommodate charging stations and different things. We already do. So we're in a good situation there. But there are some different aspects that we can consider for our code that would clarify and make sure that we're communicating to people that we are a community that is welcoming towards these. 5 of these possible enhancements to the code. First would be parking requirements. We do have minimum parking requirements for developments. Right now, we don't penalize people for putting charging stations and whatnot including that as part of their minimum. Other communities do. So we would just clarify that any spots they have reserved for EV charging would count towards their minimum parking requirements. Definitions, this would be actually the only one that would be required if we were to go for silver. We'd have to add some language to our code that defines what electric vehicles are and electric vehicles charging stations. Outdoor advertising, we need to clarify code language that says that our outdoor advertising regulations do apply to like an electric vehicle charging stations. Some of them do have advertising, they have the big logo for whoever makes them, and some of them do have like the ads that you see on like some gas stations that play. Allowing charging stations in the right of way. Currently, we don't allow any private structures in our right of way. And under the EV readiness program, that's perfectly fine. We just have to say that's what we do. If you wanted to consider changing that to allow private entities to put charging stations on our right of way, we can do that. Obviously the EV readiness program is trying to fit a whole host of different communities with different needs. In this initial cohort, the city of Chicago is in there, the city of Aurora is in there, we're in there. The village of Polo is in there, which is a small rural village that is about 30 or 40 miles southwest of Rockford. So it's trying to address the needs of multiple communities. So obviously, this allowing EV charging stations in the right of way would be something more that Chicago would probably need more than us. And then charging station appearance. We have appearance directives in the design guidelines, and we just need to clarify that the appearance regulations would apply also to charging stations. We wouldn't need to do that, but that's a possible inclusion we could make. So I'd like to hear your feedback in terms of what you think is reasonable, where you'd like to go with this. The cohort is looking for making communities to wrap up getting all the information to them by the end of July, and then by August and early September, they're going to have a recognition ceremony for all the different communities that participate.
So maybe a year ago, I talked with the village manager about whether we could try to have energy efficient public safety vehicles and maybe hybrids or maybe electric. And everybody agreed that was a great idea, except for the fact that we couldn't get any kind of public safety vehicles, and our guys were going to run down the street anyway because we couldn't get them. And when we finally could get them, we took what we could get. So, I'm sure all of us are totally in favor of having an electric fleet, but we're not getting it. So we shouldn't make any commitments that we can't meet.
And then under the program, that's fine. We don't have to, we have to lay out a plan to, look at alternatives and implement them when available, but obviously in the time of supply chain issues, I think that.
I would just point out one thing. We have started that process internally as we're looking at vehicles, and we've had that conversation as part of the budget process, and we'll continue that conversation as we continue to look at replacement vehicles and as electric becomes more common as opposed to what it is today, which does, as Jeff said, still feel a little niche, especially in use for certain types of vehicles. But there have been a slew of electric vehicles that have been released over the last couple of years that have proven that they're functional in work environments, as functional as gasoline powered. And I think that's a priority that we want to make sure we're prepared for. But to your point, not necessarily too heavily committed to in case we're unable to source them. But that's just a piece of this. I think as we look at our own fleet, that is certainly our own commitment to the community and to the broader environmental impact. But I think, as Jeff has kind of pointed out, this is much broader than just what we do ourselves as an organization.
So let me just say, and then we should hear from other folks. So Glencoe, we should be at the head of the line, which I think our residents, more than other residents around the country, are going to probably want to move to this, and we want to support the infrastructure as best we can. We should do everything we can. But people will burn this place down if we start allowing stuff in the right of way without having control over it. So maybe we'll get there, but we can't do that without great thought, because that would not work in Glencoe.
My question, because none of this addresses it, it seems, is it's fine dandy, we do all kinds of things, but if there's no juice when you plug it in, what are we doing, or what's ComEd doing, or, to bring in, here we're having all these problems with electrical generation, in various parts of town, we're having blackouts and brownouts and this and that and the other, and now we're going to contemplate greatly increasing that during certain hours. What are we doing, and what are they doing, and how will this be coordinated so we can do all these things and then it will work?
So it's a timely question because staff had a meeting with ComEd this morning talking a bit about their resiliency plans and the build out that they know they have to do to meet the electric demand that the region has. Mm-hmm. The state of Illinois has made a pretty significant commitment to electric vehicle, both production in Illinois as well as finding ways to integrate them more easily into daily life. So there are component parts of ComEd's rate structure are being discussed relative to EV build out and ensuring that they have the ability to generate what they need to provide. And that's interesting, of course, because at the very base level, we want to make sure they can do what we need them to do today, which is to stay on, and as equipment fails, ensuring that they're replacing that equipment as efficiently and with the best new equipment possible to meet the growing need. Glencoe is not an insignificant player in the electric vehicle environment. We have, if you drive through any of our neighborhoods, a higher percentage of electric vehicles than many neighbors, not all. So we're already starting to see that ramp up a bit. But that, I think, is a long-term and bigger question than just what Glencoe does. It's really how is the utility, both ComEd and Ameren throughout Illinois, going to meet those needs? They actually indicated they'd be more than happy sometime later this year to come and talk to the village board about their plans and what they are intending to do. So I think the timing is actually, we talked about this particular cohort this morning as well. They've been participating in it too. So they see it coming. But it's a good question. And I think it's an important question as the network continues to grow.
Anybody else?
My thought would be if we're gonna commit to bronze and make silver your, stretch goal. There's things in silver that look not doable. You could start stack rank them easiest to hardest. Start knocking off the things that are easy. So we make bronze and then we start working at silver, and then as you start going through it.
And we can, after we get bronze, we can go back and get upgraded to silver once we complete silver.
We should if we need to make any ordinance changes to qualify, we should be doing that. We should do as much as we can that is reasonable. And if you're thinking, oh, here's a thing we could do, but it's got all kinds of associated problems, and tell us, we could.
Including costs, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
everybody says they want to be green until you realize you got to pay for it.
Right, and it's all, but if we're talking about, an infrastructure for electric vehicles, people in Glencoe clearly would like to move there. But, and by the way, we have some charging, ignore this, we have some charging stations. I don't know how well they work. I hear that other non-Tesla charging stations don't always work, and, but we want to make it better, and we want to do whatever we can.
Okay.
Anybody else?
One other question. You mentioned that there might be some grant money available for this as well.
Potentially, and I think the EV readiness designation would put us in front of the line if we were to apply for grants for any kind of charging infrastructure. If it's different or more charging stations, possibly there could be grant funding for improving our electrical network, hopefully, and we partner with ComEd to do that, and hopefully that would it's pretty wide open in terms of what's possible. I think people are starting to discover that EVs are the way of the future, and that we need there could be potentially a lot of opportunities out there to increase in their use and their acceptability.
So we could start with a bronze designation and ramp up as both interest and resources become available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't think silver is that much of a stretch to get to. I don't think it's going to take that much more resources, take a little bit more staff time to take some of the information we have and make sure we present it to the EV readiness program in a presentable way.
Yeah,
So
and I
is
think
there any financial benefit for us to be at the silver levels versus the bronze level?
Not necessarily, no.
So in terms of,
I think what we'll do before we, come back to you with, starting to bring some of these ordinance updates back to you is we'll, kind of rank internally what we can do more easily and what perhaps we may need more feedback from you on. Again, to Jeff's point, some of these ordinance modifications are pretty straightforward without a whole lot of hurt that comes along with them. Others may have some more of an impact, and we'll want to be mindful of that for sure. But we'll begin to do that process and move down that path.
Okay, I think we talked about the electric vehicle readiness program. Is there any other business for this committee of the whole? CNA, is there a motion to adjourn? No. Do we need to say something about doing the?
No, well, we would do, we have a closed session, several items for closed session discussion that we would have at the end of the regular board meeting, but seeing as how we have 25 minutes or so, we might be able to dispense with some of those issues.
I'm totally in favor of that. Do we need to do that as part of this meeting?
As part of this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, we would adjourn into closed session.
Okay.
Rather than adjourn
All right.
the meeting.
Is there a motion to adjourn into closed session to talk about, this is 2C21, approval of closed session minutes, 2C6, sale of lease of village property.
That's all. If we get through that, I'll be.
Motion move to close session.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we're going into closed session.
We can take a 2-second break.
Okay, you're not leaving.
No, I'm gonna take a seat.
I think so is actually cheaper.